The Magnolia courtroom fell into absolute silence. All eyes turned to the black woman in a maid's uniform standing before the judge. Her composure froze the entire room, a stark contrast to the insults that those present had just hurled at her moments earlier. Judge Hamilton Royce, infamous for his arrogant tone and habit of looking down on the poor, had spent a full 20 minutes berating Evelyn Brooks. He smirked, leaned back in his chair, and enunciated each word. "Do you think you can fool this court? A maid daring to argue legal matters. This is a courtroom, not a stage for your act." His laughter echoed through the room, followed by contemptuous glances from many in the audience. But when Evelyn spoke, everything changed. Her voice was steady, clear, unwavering. She began dissecting each of Hale's arguments, citing statutes precisely, pointing out violations in the eviction process. The lawyers present exchanged confused looks. Royce gradually lost his confidence, while Hale fidgeted constantly, unsure how to react. "Objection." Hale's lawyer jumped up, his voice urgent. "Your Honor, I have reason to believe this woman is not who she claims to be." Evelyn turned her head, her gaze icy cold. "Your Honor," she said, "I can present identification at any time. But first, I affirm everything I've just presented is in accordance with the law." The courtroom fell into breathless silence. Royce banged his gavel, but his hand trembled slightly. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice lower than before. Evelyn pulled a document from her bag and handed it to the court clerk. The paper was passed up to the judge's bench. Royce read it, his expression changing dramatically. He froze, his lips moving, but no words coming out. The entire courtroom held its breath. And now, let's go back to where it all began. Evelyn Brooks, a 47-year-old black woman living in the impoverished Riverbend homes, had long grown accustomed to a quiet and enduring life. Few in that cracked wall, leaking roof neighborhood knew that Evelyn had once been an outstanding law student at Moreland University, where she received a rare full scholarship for students of color. But Evelyn's dream of becoming a lawyer came to an abrupt halt when her mother suffered a stroke, forcing her to drop out to care for her family and begin a string of menial jobs to make ends meet. Waitressing, office cleaning, babysitting. Eventually, she became a maid, a profession no one respected, but one that gave her peace in contributing a small part to others' lives. In the poor Riverbend community, Evelyn was the most beloved person. Despite her busy schedule, she always set aside evenings to help neighbors read confusing documents, write complaint letters, or explain basic laws that she still remembered vividly from her student days. People admired her knowledge and kindness, though she always said she only knew a little. To them, Evelyn was more than a maid. She was the spiritual pillar of the entire neighborhood. One day, a notice posted at the Riverbend gate terrified every family. The complex had been sold to Hale Properties real estate conglomerate. Residents knew all too well the company's notorious reputation, specializing in buying low-income areas cheaply, forcing tenants out to build luxury projects. The sale happening so quickly, without any prior warning, made Evelyn uneasy. Her legal instincts told her something was wrong with the deal. At that moment, Lydia Coleman, a 58-year-old close neighbor, living alone with heart disease, came to Evelyn trembling with an eviction letter. The order demanded she leave her home in 7 days, with no clear explanation or prior notice. Lydia broke down in tears. She had no money for a lawyer, no relatives, nowhere to go if evicted. Evelyn examined the documents, her eyes sharpening immediately. The violations were glaring: lack of minimum notice, no valid reason, abnormally shortened enforcement process. She called free legal hotlines, but all rejected Lydia's case as too small and not prioritized. The system's helplessness choked Evelyn. Seeing Lydia's despair, Evelyn knew that if she did nothing, no one else would. And with all her remaining knowledge and unwavering compassion, Evelyn made the riskiest decision of her life to represent Lydia in court herself. The Magnolia courtroom appeared with absolute luxury and order. Polished walnut floors, varnished tables and chairs, warm golden lighting that felt coldly intimidating. Lawyers in neat suits glided past, while Evelyn stood in her maid's uniform, clutching her file tightly. The contrast was enough to make a few people frown slightly, with whispers arising as she approached the plaintiff's table. From the high bench, Millionaire Judge Hamilton Royce observed Evelyn with eyes full of suspicion. He was known for being wealthy, strict, and often dismissive of those from the working class. In just a moment of seeing Evelyn, his skeptical attitude was clear. Hale Properties' lawyer flashed a mocking smile, deliberately speaking loud enough for everyone to hear, a maid wanting to participate in the hearing. Royce narrowed his eyes, lightly tapping his fingers on the judge's chair, then asked directly with a sarcastic tone, "Are you here to clean or to argue the law?" The question prompted laughter throughout the courtroom. Evelyn remained calm, opening her file in front of her. When asked to present, she began speaking, her voice clear and firm. She cited exact provisions from Georgia housing law, specifying notice period requirements, legal eviction procedures, and listing each violation by Hale Properties. The laughter in the room gradually faded. Attention shifted entirely to the woman standing in the center. Royce's gaze slowly changed from contempt to confusion. He leaned down to review the documents. Evelyn submitted, as if checking if he'd misheard. Then he asked, his voice low but tense, "Where were you trained in law to present like a professional attorney?" Evelyn raised her head, responding calmly, "I studied law once, but my family faced a crisis, forcing me to stop and work." In that instant, the courtroom fell silent. No one looked at Evelyn the same way anymore. She had forced them to reconsider everything they thought about her. A heavy silence enveloped the courtroom after Evelyn's response. She opened the thick file she had meticulously prepared over many sleepless nights. Before Royce and everyone, Evelyn presented each document methodically. Lydia's original lease with clear signing date, valid renewal papers, photos of the apartment's current condition showing Lydia had not violated rules as Hale alleged. She even produced printed emails from the building manager, threatening words seemingly intended to pressure the ill woman into leaving voluntarily, without considering her rights. Royce frowned slightly, while Hale's lawyer crossed his arms, showing disregard for what was being presented. Evelyn continued, her voice steady but resolute, explaining Georgia housing eviction procedures. Tenants must receive at least 30 days' notice, clear evidence of contract breach, and the right to request extensions or negotiations before enforcement. She pointed out each step Hale Properties had skipped or deliberately violated, from shortening notice time to providing no legitimate reason for evicting Lydia. Hale's lawyer sneered, saying with heavy contempt, "A maid lecturing on law. What you're saying is just copied from the internet. It has no legal value." He turned to Royce. "Your Honor, I move to dismiss everything as this is not authenticated evidence." Royce nodded agreeably, seeming to lean toward him, and repeatedly interrupted Evelyn whenever she tried to continue. "You're inaccurate. I could fine you for providing false information," he warned in a menacing tone, clearly trying to unsettle her. But Evelyn remained calm, eyes fixed on her file. She knew she was right. She knew she couldn't back down. At that moment, Hale's lawyer placed an email on the table, triumph evident in his face. "Here," he declared, "is an email Lydia sent to management, admitting her apartment violated rules. That's sufficient grounds for eviction." The courtroom buzzed, and Royce immediately seized the paper, reviewing it trustingly. But Evelyn needed only seconds to spot the anomaly. She calmly requested to examine the email. Upon closer look, Evelyn noticed the timestamp didn't match the building's calendar system. The header showed edits, and most importantly, the sending device's IP was from Hale Properties' internal system, not Lydia's. She looked up, her voice clear. "This email is invalid. It has been altered." The courtroom froze. Hale's lawyer paled, trying to stay composed. "Who do you think you are to conclude that?" Evelyn didn't respond, but requested directly. "I asked to examine the email's metadata. a request rarely heard from a maid. Royce appeared extremely annoyed, seeing it as overstepping, but Hale's lawyer couldn't refuse. If the metadata proved Evelyn right, he'd expose his own wrongdoing. Royce reluctantly allowed it, his gaze icy as if noting every offense by Evelyn for later retaliation. When the metadata was revealed, Evelyn pointed precisely to the technical string. This is Hale Properties Office IP. If from Lydia, it should originate from her device. The courtroom atmosphere solidified. Hale's lawyer choked, trying excuses but exposing more flaws. Evelyn continued cornering him. If you claim this email is genuine, how do you explain it being sent from your company's internal server? Hale's lawyer fell completely silent. Eyes in the room began shifting, no longer seeing Evelyn as a maid, but as the only one holding firm to argument and truth. Royce stared at Evelyn for a long time. In his eyes, contempt was replaced by a hint of wariness. He realized Evelyn was no easy opponent, and that was why he prepared for a stronger, more dangerous counterattack. Outside the courtroom that day, as people still discussed the confrontation between Evelyn and Hale's lawyer, a young man sitting in the dim corner of a cafe near the courthouse watched a viral video repeatedly. The scene of Judge Royce mocking Evelyn, the courtroom laughing at her, and Evelyn calmly turning the tide. The man was Caleb Turner, 32 years old, formerly a cybersecurity engineer for a major tech company. He was fired after whistleblowing data fraud, collapsing his career overnight. Now, Caleb struggled to survive in Riverbend Homes, where Evelyn also lived. Having endured life's injustices, Caleb had gradually lost faith in justice. But the video of Evelyn, the maid daring to stand against a real estate conglomerate and a powerful judge, left him unable to remain indifferent. A few days later, Evelyn passed the Riverbend common area and saw Caleb repairing an old computer for a neighborhood family. She stopped, gently inquiring. The initial conversation was ordinary, until Evelyn mentioned the fake email Hale's lawyer presented in court. Caleb immediately perked up, his eyes sharpening like spotting an anomaly. "You said the send time didn't match?" he asked. Evelyn nodded. Caleb thought for a moment, then said directly, "I can check for you. Sounds like someone tampered with the data." Evelyn was briefly surprised by the offer, but Caleb's resolute tone convinced her he knew what he was talking about. With years of cybersecurity experience, Caleb quickly identified a public unpatched vulnerability in Hale Properties' system. Using this vulnerability, completely legal in public access scope, he accessed the company's internal management page. The cluttered interface didn't challenge Caleb. In minutes he found the archived, deleted folder, containing edited or deleted email versions. There, he discovered the original version of the email Hale used to accuse Lydia. Metadata showed the initial email contained no violation content. It wasn't even written by Lydia. All edit traces pointed to one person, Tracy Voss, a mid-level legal employee at Hale Properties. Log files displayed matching IP from the company office, proving edits occurred at headquarters, not from Lydia. Staring at the numbers and data codes, Caleb understood this was evidence fabrication. When he presented his findings to Evelyn, she was stunned momentarily. "You're touching something dangerous," Caleb said seriously. "People like Hale or Royce won't let anyone hinder them." Evelyn clenched her fists. "I know," she said softly, "but if I give up, Lydia could die from this stress. She has no one but me." Caleb looked at Evelyn for a long time. He saw in that small woman a resolve rare in his life. Finally, he nodded slightly. "Then I'll help." And thus in the poor Riverbend Homes, an unexpected alliance formed: the former law student Maid and the forgotten cybersecurity engineer. Evelyn decided to bring all evidence back to court, ready to confront Hale's lawyer and Judge Royce again. Caleb agreed to serve as digital witness, prepared to reveal the truth Hale had hidden. The fight was no longer Evelyn's alone. It had become a battle to expose the truth. The next morning, when Evelyn and Caleb returned to the Magnolia courtroom, the atmosphere was completely different. It was no longer a quiet hearing like before. This time, a few reporters stood outside the doors filming. A group of Riverbend residents sat silently in the back rows, and quite a few curious onlookers from neighboring areas had come to watch. They wanted to know if the maid who had dared to stand up against the real estate conglomerate and the millionaire judge could truly shake the entire system. Evelyn stepped forward without fear, while Caleb sat behind with his laptop, ready to assist. When Royce called for the continuation of the presentation, Evelyn presented the digital evidence that Caleb had helped prepare the original metadata of the email, the initial version before it was altered, and the IP data matching Hale Properties office. Each piece of data was presented clearly, like sharp needles piercing straight through Hale's defenses. Royce listened in silence, but discomfort was evident on his face. He didn't want these things exposed in public, especially with reporters sitting just meters away. Hale's lawyer reacted fiercely. He jumped up, pointing at Caleb, and loudly accusing, "This evidence is illegal. That man illegally accessed our system. This is hacking. Unacceptable." He tried to turn Caleb into a criminal and drag Evelyn's credibility down with him, saying that a maid who doesn't understand the law was exploiting technology to slander. Evelyn immediately stepped forward to rebut. Her voice steady as a rock. The information was accessed entirely through a public vulnerability in Hale Properties. There was no illegal intrusion. She presented screenshots of the security flaw webpage that anyone could access if they knew the link. Royce narrowed his eyes in annoyance, but he couldn't deny the obvious. If the company failed to secure its data, that was their fault, not the discoverers. He was forced to accept the evidence. The tension in the courtroom peaked when Evelyn presented the original email version and once again proved all alterations originated from within Hale's system. In that very moment, Brandon Hale, the conglomerate's owner, could no longer contain himself. He stood up abruptly, his face flushed red, shouting before the entire room, "She's lying. This is all fabricated. It's all made up." Royce immediately barked, "Mr. Hale, sit down at once. This is a courtroom, not a place for you to lose control." But it was too late. Hale's outburst and blind accusations caused the audience to start whispering. To them, no innocent person would lose composure like that. Evelyn stood still, without needing to react intensely. Her calm demeanor only made them believe even more that everything she said had basis. For the first time since the case began, she saw genuine respect in the eyes of those around her. Even one reporter secretly scribbled faster, as if witnessing a major turning point. Royce, realizing he couldn't prolong it further without exposing bias, was forced to declare, "The hearing is recessed. The court needs time to review the new evidence." As everyone stood to leave, Hale passed by Evelyn. He paused for just a second, leaned in close, and whispered in a low, threatening voice, "You'll pay for this." Evelyn didn't respond, but her hands clenched tightly around her file. She understood danger was approaching, but also that she had just won the first victory in this long battle. That very afternoon, shortly after the courtroom had cleared, a court employee approached Evelyn. "Judge Royce requests you come to his office immediately." Without a lawyer, without support, Evelyn had to enter alone what was considered the territory of the most powerful man in the building. Royce's office was vast, paneled in dark wood, with golden lighting casting down on the large desk, making the space even heavier. Evelyn stood before him, hands gripping her file tightly, but inside her chest, her heart pounded like war drums. Royce didn't offer a seat, just eyed her from head to toe with a gaze sharp as a knife, clearly trying to create psychological pressure. He began in a calm voice laced with threat. "I have a few questions to clarify your qualifications for representing a case yourself." Then he fired off personal questions like bullets. "How far did you study law? Why did you drop out midway? Any academic fraud?" Each question aimed to drown Evelyn in suspicion, turning her from a defender of truth into the one under investigation. Royce noted down her every answer, then set his pen down with disgust. "I will issue a notice to investigate you." He listed accusations as if predetermined: practicing law without a license, fabricating evidence, conspiring to manipulate the court. Each word was like a net thrown straight at Evelyn, not to seek truth, but to force her to withdraw from the case. Royce wanted her to crumble before the truth could emerge. That night, when Evelyn returned to Riverbend, 2 judicial police officers stood at her door. Neighbors rushed out in commotion, everyone fearing the worst. Lydia, stepping over from across the hall, fainted on the spot upon seeing the police, overwhelmed with worry. Evelyn wanted to rush to help, but was told to stand still for inspection. Rumors spread quickly through the complex, enveloping everyone in unease. Evelyn was taken to the court's security room for questioning. Harsh lights, chilly atmosphere, and a legal staffer recording every word. They read Royce's accusations again, then pushed a stack of papers toward her. If you admit errors in collecting evidence, everything will be handled leniently. Just sign here. Evelyn looked at the papers, her hands trembling slightly, but her eyes steady. She knew one signature would destroy the only chance to save Lydia and the entire truth. She set the pen down and pushed the papers back. No, she said, her voice low but powerful. If I had truly committed a crime, I wouldn't have dared stand before him from the start. The statement froze the room. Royce, observing the interrogation from behind two-way glass, burst in immediately, face full of rage. He slammed his hand on the table, the bang echoing through the room. "You're just a maid," he growled. "You think you can beat me?" Evelyn didn't back down. She looked straight at him, not defiantly, but resolutely, as if she had nothing left to lose but the truth. The prolonged silence only infuriated Royce more, but he couldn't hold Evelyn longer without legal grounds. Finally, she was released, free but heavy-hearted. As she stepped out of the courthouse, Evelyn understood one thing clearly. She had struck Royce where it hurt most, and because of that, he wouldn't stop. Royce had shifted from contempt to viewing her as a threat. And a man like him, once he saw someone as a threat, would do anything to eliminate them. As Evelyn left the courthouse after the grueling interrogation, her steps grew heavy, as if carrying hundreds of pounds of stone. The late afternoon air at Riverbend Homes was unusually quiet. Neighbors who usually greeted her with smiles now stood silently in the yard, eyes filled with worry, following her every step. No one dared ask, but that silence said enough. They had heard about the police at her door. Caleb waited at her entrance, his face full of guilt. "I'm sorry," he said, as soon as she approached. "I shouldn't have dragged you into this mess. They're targeting you because of what I found." Evelyn shook her head but said nothing. She was too exhausted to reassure him. And truthfully, she wasn't sure she could continue. When Lydia came over from across the hall, still pale from her earlier faint, she grasped Evelyn's hands tightly, voice trembling. "Child, stop this. They'll arrest you. You've helped me enough." For the first time since the case began, Evelyn felt the fire in her heart waver. She looked at the papers in her hand, at Lydia's fearful eyes, at the poor complex that had endured so much injustice. A moment of hesitation made her feel smaller than ever. That night, sitting alone in her small room, Evelyn unconsciously recalled a memory she had long buried. A stark white hospital scene, where her mother lay on the bed, breathing faintly. Evelyn was still an ambitious law student. Then, her mother grasped her daughter's hand and said, "Justice isn't a profession, my girl. It's character. No matter what job you do, if you stand for the truth, you're still a guardian of justice." Those words had been a red thread through Evelyn's life, but due to daily struggles, losses, and time, she had forgotten them. Now, remembering, they lit up a corner of her soul she thought extinguished. Evelyn realized she was wrong to think only lawyers could defend justice. Even as a maid, she still had that character, knowledge, courage, and the desire to stand for the weak, things no one could take from her. As Evelyn stepped out of her room, she encountered an elderly black woman in the complex, who had lived in Riverbend for over 30 years. The old woman took Evelyn's hands, her own trembling but eyes bright. "We've never had anyone stand up for us. Don't stop, child." Those words choked Evelyn up. She looked around and saw not just one, but many in the complex watching, faintly hoping in her. Their eyes made Evelyn understand. This fight was no longer just hers or Lydia's. It was for a community trampled too long. As night fell, Evelyn knocked on Caleb's door. He opened it, still looking worried. She said, "I need your help. We have to see this through." Caleb's eyes lit up unexpectedly, as if regaining faith he'd long lost. He nodded firmly. "Then we'll fight to the end." And in that poor complex, among people too accustomed to injustice, Evelyn straightened her back again, stronger than ever, ready to face whatever Royce would do next. After that nighttime conversation, Caleb didn't rest but immediately dove deeper into Hale Properties data. He sat before his old laptop in the cramped room, screen light reflecting on his tense face. Lines of data and financial diagrams appeared and vanished under his hands, until Caleb discovered something that stunned him. Hale Properties was actually a subsidiary in a complex network of Royce Holdings, the real estate investment conglomerate that Judge Hamilton Royce controlled from the shadows. Moreover, bank statements Caleb gathered from public sources showed that every quarter, Hale Properties transferred regular sums to an investment fund called Royce Capital Partners. The fund's owner was none other than Royce. This was no longer suspicion, but direct evidence of Royce's financial ties to Hale. Clearly, he had strong motive to protect them in court. When Evelyn heard this, she was dazed for a few seconds. Everything suddenly became clear. The evictions of Riverbend residents, the shady contracts, the blatant bias in the courtroom, all part of a larger scheme. Royce wasn't just a judge, he was behind the campaign to displace hundreds of poor families, then resell the land to investors for massive profits. Riverbend Homes was just one small piece in a tens of millions-dollar puzzle Royce was manipulating. Evelyn spread the documents on the table, mapping with Caleb from Hale Properties to Royce Holdings, from money transfers to shell companies, from internal emails to suspiciously timed contracts. Connecting lines stretched from one page to another. Looking at it, Evelyn saw before her not just a single eviction, but an entire corruption network. "Royce isn't just violating professional ethics," Evelyn whispered. "He's using his power to steal homes from the poor." But as the truth grew clearer, the risks escalated. That night, as Evelyn took out the trash, she spotted a black SUV parked not far from her home, engine off, but headlights still warm, as if it had just arrived. Inside were two motionless figures, seemingly watching. A while later, the vehicle quietly drove away, tires crunching on gravel with a chilling sound. The next morning, Caleb banged on Evelyn's door, his face pale. "Someone's following you." He recounted how, when he left to buy food, the same SUV tailed him for 2 blocks before vanishing. Caleb became more serious than ever. "Royce could do anything to protect this secret," he said, voice low but resolute. "He has money, power, connections. We have to be extremely careful." Evelyn was silent for a few seconds, but not from fear. She was weighing options. She knew the deeper they went, the greater threat she became to Royce. But she also understood, if she backed down now, Lydia would lose her home, Riverbend would be demolished, and the truth buried forever. She took a deep breath, then looked straight at Caleb. "If we've uncovered the truth, we can't hide it." Caleb nodded. "But bringing it all to court means putting yourself in the storm's eye," Evelyn replied, without hesitation. "I've been in the storm since I walked into that courtroom. Only now I know who I'm really fighting." And so the decision was made. Evelyn would bring all the financial evidence, money flow diagrams, and metadata Caleb found to court. She was no longer just defending Lydia. She was preparing to confront the most powerful man in Magnolia directly. The battle had far exceeded a single hearing. It had become a war between truth and power. And Evelyn knew well the path ahead would be extremely dangerous. But she kept going, despite everything. The courtroom that day was packed to the brim, with even the hallways having no standing room left. Rumors about Evelyn, a maid, preparing to expose a massive real estate conspiracy, had spread throughout Magnolia. The press arrived with cameras and microphones, Social activist groups held banners protesting housing evictions. Riverbend residents filled the back rows completely, their eyes full of hope. The atmosphere was charged, as if the entire city was waiting for a long-buried truth to surface. When Judge Royce entered, his face was tense, devoid of his usual smugness. He kept glancing at the reporters, as if their presence was stripping him of control. Evelyn stood up, calmly spreading a large financial diagram on the presentation table. She began with the shady payments between Hale Properties and Royce Holdings. Money flows not in public reports but appearing in internal accounting ledgers that Caleb had accessed. Her pointer moved from one box to another, highlighting the regular transaction chain. Hundreds of thousands of dollars transferred back and forth like a secret remittance network. Then she presented printed emails marked confidential, exchanges between Brandon Hale and an address from Royce's financial management group. In the emails, Hale reported the eviction status at Riverbend and requested approval to accelerate the process. Next came altered ledgers, 2 different records, one clean for audits, the other full of signs concealing transactions. Each detail Evelyn presented was like a direct blow to the system Royce had built over years. Hale's lawyer jumped up, his voice sharp. It's all speculation. These documents can't be considered evidence. Where did she get them? He was visibly sweating, hands slightly trembling, eyes repeatedly looking toward Royce for rescue, but Evelyn remained unflinching. She produced bank transfer receipts with digital signatures and authentication codes. Server log codes proving Hale Properties' internal data was altered on the exact day Lydia received her eviction notice. Details in the records perfectly matching public data. Anyone could verify. She spoke slowly and firmly, each word like a hammer strike on the crumbling defenses before her eyes. The courtroom fell into breathless silence. Judge Royce began trembling, having to grip his gavel tightly to stay composed. Veins pulsed at his temples. He tried to hide it by banging the gavel hard, shouting, "Order! This is not the place for her to make baseless accusations." But the more he yelled, the more his confusion showed. The audience in the back began whispering, voices spreading through the room. Turns out the maid is telling the truth. I knew it. Hale's always been fraudulent. She dared to stand up. Not everyone can do that. Royce looked down, trying to maintain dignity, but clearly cornered. Every gaze from the public, every camera click from reporters was like a knife twisting into his mask of power. Hale's lawyer tried approaching Evelyn to seize the documents, but Royce had to bang the gavel repeatedly for order. The atmosphere heated up, as if the entire courtroom was witnessing a bridge slowly cracking. When Evelyn finished the final part, an email confirming Royce Holdings had directly profited from reselling Riverbend's land fund, Royce could no longer maintain composure. He staggered back in his chair, struggling to breathe. Under immense pressure from the press and public, he could only say, "The trial is recessed to review further documents." His voice was hoarse, devoid of any authority. When the gavel struck the final time, the entire courtroom knew something had collapsed. Royce, the man who always thought himself invincible, had exposed his fear before everyone. This was just the beginning of that collapse. The very next morning, while people were still discussing the shocking previous hearing, Royce unexpectedly reopened the trial earlier than scheduled. No one understood what he was planning, but the tension in his eyes revealed he was preparing a counterattack. When Evelyn entered the courtroom, she saw a strange man standing in the witness row. He was neatly dressed, hair overly groomed, eyes shifty like someone unused to crowds. Royce looked down, lightly tapping the gavel for attention. Today the court will hear new testimony. This witness claims Mrs. Evelyn Brooks received money from Hale Properties to participate in an illegal scheme. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Evelyn stood still, unable to believe her ears. The man stepped to the stand and began a smooth story that he had seen Evelyn receive an envelope from a Hale employee in the parking lot, that Evelyn was actually colluding to double-cross and extort the conglomerate. Every word was well prepared, but strangely illogical. Royce nodded gravely, trying to appear serious. This testimony carries weight, Mrs. Brooks. If true, you're deceiving the court and the entire community. Evelyn clearly sensed the trap set. But instead of panicking, she looked directly at the witness. Her gaze so calm it made him step back slightly. "You say you met me in the west parking lot?" Evelyn asked. The man nodded. "On the 6th of this month?" He nodded again, somewhat flustered. Evelyn opened her bag and pulled out a receipt from Lydia's clinic. That day she was taking Lydia to emergency care, not at the courthouse. The courtroom fell dead silent. She continued, "You say you work independently, but this is an old personnel record from Royce Holdings." Evelyn held up a printout Caleb had found. "Your name is here. You were a temporary employee of this company." The courtroom exploded in discussion. The witness's face went pale, momentarily looking like he might flee. Royce immediately banged the gavel hard. "Order." But even he couldn't stop the suspicious glances from all sides. Evelyn didn't need to say more. The truth had spoken for itself. However, Royce's counterattack didn't stop there. That afternoon, when Evelyn returned to Riverbend Homes, she found an unmarked envelope slipped under her door. Opening it, inside was a single sheet. "Stop or you'll be buried." The scrawled handwriting exuded chilling threat. Evelyn stood frozen for a moment. She had known this fight was dangerous, but this was the first time she felt it so viscerally. A breeze blew through the hallway, carrying unease like a tightening grip. But then Evelyn pocketed the note, sighing slowly. In the slanting afternoon light, her face was not that of someone giving up. She had come too far, seen too much truth to turn back. Royce wanted to scare her, but Evelyn understood that his resort to such dirty tactics proved one thing: he was weakening. And if justice had a chance to emerge, she had to pave the way for it. Whether ahead was an abyss or hellfire, Evelyn remained determined to press on. The threatening note in the envelope hadn't yet faded its chill, when the next morning, the entire state of Magnolia seemed to explode with a series of new TV news reports. From local stations to major state channels, they all simultaneously covered the story of Evelyn Brooks, the maid standing up against a real estate conglomerate and a millionaire judge. Reports showed footage of Evelyn confronting in court, analyzing financial evidence, and the moment Hale lost control in rage. Anchors spoke excitedly. An ordinary woman is doing what many lawyers wouldn't dare, challenging power. Reporters went to Riverbend Homes, interviewing the elderly woman who had held Evelyn's hand. Those Evelyn helped file complaints. Children in the complex she had babysat. Everyone said the same. "She's the only one who ever stood up for us." Overnight, Evelyn's story spread across the state, and it showed most clearly when the next hearing opened. No longer just a few dozen people, hundreds gathered outside the Magnolia courthouse. They carried handwritten signs, simple yet powerful words. "Justice for Evelyn. We stand with our maid. Protect our homes." Many had never met Evelyn, but they came because they saw her representing themselves. Those once despised, ignored, crushed by the rich and powerful. As Evelyn climbed the courthouse steps, the crowd parted for her, their faces lit with hope. A young mother holding her child near the fence said to Evelyn, "You're our voice." Evelyn bowed in thanks, her heart both trembling and warm. Inside the courtroom, not a seat was empty. Reporters crowded, lenses aimed at the judge's bench where Royce entered, and this time his face showed not arrogance but evident strain. He conducted the trial stiffly, but everyone saw his hand tremble slightly holding the gavel. Media pressure weighed heavily on him. Hale's lawyer was worse. He kept wiping sweat, avoiding the angry public eyes behind him. Whispers of greedy bastard, fraud, stealing poor people's homes were soft but enough to make him squirm. When it was Evelyn's turn to speak, she didn't start with documents. Instead, she looked around the room, at faces that once ignored her existence. She spoke in a low but resonant voice, each word clear as if touching hearts. "I'm not representing just Lydia. I'm representing all those looked down on, deemed unworthy of listening to, pushed into society's dark corners simply because they're poor, because they have no voice. I'm here not because I want to, but because if I stay silent, no one else will speak for us." The courtroom went completely silent. Reporters paused, clicking for a second. Drawn in, a man in the back row raised his fist, whispering, "That's justice." Royce tried to maintain sternness, but his eyes averted when Evelyn mentioned those in power using the law for personal gain. He knew she meant him, and the public knew too. As the hearing moved to further questioning, a group of law students from Moreland University suddenly appeared, holding high banners. "Let truth speak." Their presence energized the room. They weren't there to pressure, but to show justice belongs to anyone brave enough to defend it, even a maid. By the hearing's end, without any conclusion needed, public opinion had fully swung to Evelyn. People no longer saw her as a maid, but as a symbol of courage, a woman standing against unjust structures everyone feared touching. As she exited the court, applause erupted like waves. Signs "We stand with our maid" rose higher. A little girl in the crowd ran up, giving Evelyn a small scribbled card. "You're our hero." And Evelyn understood clearly from this moment, she was no longer fighting alone. Just as support for Evelyn peaked in the courtroom, with hundreds of eyes on her awaiting the next miracle, the large doors at the back suddenly burst open. A group in black jackets with prominent FBI letters strode in, boots thudding heavily on the floor. The entire courtroom stood up. The sudden appearance froze the already tense air. Royce, preparing for the next questioning, froze, his face draining of color. Evelyn turned instinctively, heart pounding not from fear but from sensing something monumental impending. The FBI leader walked straight to the witness stand and declared clearly, "We are executing an arrest warrant." The courtroom erupted like breaking waves. Brandon Hale, the Hale Properties owner, face ashen, sweat streaming down his temples. An agent turned to him, and without hesitation, cuffed his wrists. "Brandon Hale, you are under arrest for charges of financial fraud, bribery of officials, and falsifying legal records related to Magnolia housing complexes." Whispers quickly turned to small cheers. Some couldn't believe their eyes. Hale struggled, shouting desperately, "No, you have no right. This is my trial. I did nothing wrong." But two agents tightened the cuffs, immobilizing him. Royce, face ghostly pale, slammed the gavel. "Stop this at once. This is an ongoing trial. I won't allow interference." The FBI agent turned to him, unflinching. "Judge Royce, we have a lawful arrest warrant approved by federal court. You have no authority to obstruct." The response struck like a hammer on Royce's foundation. He opened his mouth to speak more, but couldn't. Every eye in the room turned to him. No longer respect, but suspicion, even contempt. Another agent stepped forward with a thick file. "Additionally, we have completed data cross-verification. The evidence provided by Mrs. Evelyn Brooks, including money flows, email metadata, server logs, matches perfectly with information the FBI has gathered over 3 years in investigating the illegal real estate network." Evelyn froze. She hadn't expected her findings to be the final piece. A federal investigation awaited. Those around whispered in amazement. She did it. Evelyn exposed the truth the whole system hid. Unbelievable. Royce looked at Evelyn, eyes filled with anger and fear. He understood the maid he once mocked had just shattered the entire wall of power he built around himself. An agent approached Royce. "Judge Hamilton Royce, per federal court decision, you are suspended from all judicial duties until the investigation into conflict of interest and corruption allegations related to Royce Holdings is complete." Royce seemed drained of strength. He braced on the desk to stay upright. For the first time, the man once atop power looked pathetically small. No longer the arrogant millionaire judge, but someone about to face his own truth. As FBI led Hale out, media swarmed the doors. Camera flashes non-stop, reporters shouting questions. But amid the chaos, eyes turned to Evelyn, the woman standing calmly in the storm's center, dignity intact. Then what happened made the courtroom explode. Riverbend residents, activist groups, law students, even some court staff stood and applauded. Prolonged applause echoed, acknowledging the victory of one no one thought would go this far. Evelyn held her breath, feeling her spine tingle with emotion. She never fought for glory. She just wanted to save one woman from the street. But with her resolve and kindness, she had opened something far greater, a long locked door to justice. As Royce left the courtroom in silence, head bowed, everyone understood a new chapter in the case was beginning. But the first major victory belonged to Evelyn, and it resounded through the courtroom like an affirmation. Truth may be buried, but never extinguished. As the applause still echoed outside the courtroom, FBI agents quietly escorted Royce to a temporary interrogation room in the federal courthouse. Gone was the black robe that once allowed him to stride with authority. Gone was the spotlight on the judge's bench, symbolizing absolute respect. Now Royce was just a man trying to cling to the fragments of the power he had built over a lifetime. That afternoon, Evelyn received a notification from the FBI inviting her to confirm some critical data related to the investigation. She assumed it would involve verifying a few documents, but as she entered the small interrogation room, she didn't expect to face a moment more significant than any previous hearing. Harsh white lights shone down on the cold metal table, and there, sitting straight-backed but unable to hide his unease, was Hamilton Royce, the millionaire judge who once viewed Evelyn as contemptible. As the door closed behind Evelyn, Royce slowly looked up. His face was gaunt, silver hair slightly disheveled, eyes devoid of their usual arrogant confidence. He looked at her as if she were the cause of every tragedy raining down on him. "Are you satisfied now?" Royce asked, his voice hoarse, but still trying to maintain superiority. "You've ruined my reputation. I've lost everything because of someone like you." Evelyn stood still for a few seconds. She felt no joy or vengeance, only a painful calm, like witnessing a truth, long overdue for confrontation, finally emerging. She sat down across from him, her gaze steady but without hatred. "I didn't ruin you," Evelyn replied. "You did that yourself. All I did was simply show everyone the truth that already existed." Royce lightly slammed his hand on the table, clinging to his remaining authority. "You don't understand. I did everything for development, for order. I've dedicated my life to serving this system." Evelyn tilted her head, her eyes sharper. "What system? The one you used to displace poor families from their homes? The one where you hid shady profits? Or the one that only protects those with money to bend the rules?" Royce pressed his lips together, as if holding back anger, but clearly knowing Evelyn was right. She continued, her voice not raised but resonant with weight. "You used the judge's seat like a shield, thinking it allowed you to do anything without question. But justice isn't something you own. It doesn't serve you. It serves the truth." Royce leaned forward, trying to regain control. "You're just a maid," he said. But this time his voice was unusually weak, like a statement lacking breath and conviction. Evelyn looked directly at him, with the eyes of someone who had endured a lifetime of being looked down upon but never fallen. "Yes, I am a maid, and you think that makes me inferior? You think because I'm black, because I wear this uniform, I lack intelligence, lack value." Royce opened his mouth, but no words came. Evelyn continued, her voice slow but resounding, each word etching into the cold walls around them. "Intelligence doesn't choose skin color. Dignity doesn't choose class. Truth doesn't choose sides. I don't need a law degree to understand what's right, and you have no right to decide who gets to seek justice." Royce looked down at his trembling hands. He no longer argued, no longer raged, no longer had the pride that once armored him, only a naked defeat he couldn't hide. Evelyn went on, her voice softer now, as if speaking for the wounds she had carried. "You didn't lose because of me. You lost because you forgot that the law was created to protect the vulnerable, not to serve those already too powerful." Royce closed his eyes briefly, as if acknowledging that every word struck his weakest spot, the truth he had always avoided. The room fell silent, only the steady hum of the air conditioning. An agent entered with additional documents for Evelyn to sign, breaking the confrontation. Evelyn stood, gathering her papers. Before opening the door to leave, she turned back to Royce one last time. "I hope you remember this," she said slowly. "Justice doesn't need to be loud to win. It just needs one person brave enough to stand up." Royce didn't respond. He just sat there, head bowed, his shadow falling on the table like that of extinguished power. Evelyn opened the door and stepped out of the interrogation room. Light from outside fell on her face, and though the journey still lay ahead, her posture said one thing. She emerged as a victor not because she wanted to win, but because she had forced the truth to speak. As Evelyn stepped out of the interrogation room, still feeling the heat on her spine from the choked confrontation with Royce, she heard that the hearing would resume the next morning, with a new judge. Royce's suspension was not just the fall of one powerful man. It opened the door for Lydia's case to be tried fairly. That morning, the Magnolia courtroom was more crowded than ever. Riverbend residents packed from the hallways to the doors. Press jostled to set up cameras, but the atmosphere was entirely different. No longer the tension of the strong oppressing the weak, but anticipation filled with hope. On the bench, Judge Marlene Carter, a white woman in her 50s known for fairness and intolerance of corruption, entered. She surveyed the room with seriousness, but full respect for everyone present. "Today," she said, "we continue the case of Lydia Coleman versus Hale Properties, based on legally verified evidence." Her voice rang clear and strong, as if restoring true order to the courtroom. Evelyn stood beside Lydia, the frail elderly woman whose eyes now shone brightly after days of fear. She gripped Evelyn's hand tightly, clinging to her only hope. As Judge Carter reviewed all the documents provided by Evelyn and Caleb, she didn't take long to recognize their validity and weight. She set the file down, looking directly at Hale Properties' representative. "You not only violated eviction procedures," the judge said, "but deliberately concealed information, presented false evidence, and caused severe harm to the tenant's rights." Hale's lawyer bowed his head, knowing all escapes were closed. Then Judge Carter delivered the ruling. The entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath, for the court rules in favor of Lydia Coleman. She is awarded damages, granted permanent residency protection in her apartment, and any eviction attempts by Hale Properties are permanently prohibited. Lydia burst into tears on the stand. Evelyn supported her, eyes welling up too. Everyone behind erupted in applause, thunderous like roaring waves against the courtroom ceiling. But the victory didn't stop there. In a Magnolia government hearing held immediately after, a housing commission representative announced a large-scale investigation into Royce Holdings. All mass eviction projects linked to the conglomerate would be halted for review. Riverbend Homes, where hundreds of poor people feared losing their homes, was now notified it would remain for residents. All eviction orders were fully canceled. The poor complex erupted in joy, like a breaking dam. They hugged in the courtyard, sobbing in overwhelming relief. One man said aloud, voice breaking, "We're saved." The press immediately swarmed Evelyn. They photographed, interviewed, captured every moment. An Evening Magnolia Voice article ran the headline, "The Maid Who Fought the System and Won." Another paper wrote, "Evelyn Brooks, the maid who did what even lawyers wouldn't dare." As Evelyn descended the courthouse steps, Riverbend residents rushed to embrace her. Lydia held her longest, trembling with each breath. "You saved me. You saved all of us." A group of youths held high a sign with Evelyn's image. "Our hero." Children ran around her, laughing loudly, as if sensing the profound change in their lives. Evelyn stood amid the circle, heart swelling with hundreds of emotions, relief, gratitude, and quiet pride. She never imagined standing up for one neighbor would spark such a powerful movement. The community embraced her like embracing the hope they thought lost forever. And in that moment, Evelyn understood justice wasn't just restored in the courtroom. It was restored in the hearts of those long trampled, long silenced by society. The resounding courtroom victory not only protected Lydia and all Riverbend residents, but carried Evelyn Brooks' name far beyond the poor complex where she lived. In just weeks, numerous legal organizations, social activist groups, and law schools invited her to speak as an honorary guest. Her first speech at a legal workshop for the poor brought the entire auditorium to its feet in applause. Evelyn recounted her journey without embellishment or boasting, just the story of an ordinary person daring to confront injustice. Her words, "Justice belongs to no one exclusively. It needs those brave enough to seek it," became widely quoted on social media. From everywhere, worker rights organizations sought Evelyn, asking her advice on evictions, exploitative contracts, benefits the poor never thought they could claim. In their eyes, Evelyn wasn't just a case winner. She was a living symbol that ordinary people could defend themselves. Caleb, witnessing it all, suggested Evelyn form a community legal support group, and thus Riverbend Justice Circle was born, a name cheered by the entire complex. The group included Evelyn, Caleb, several Moreland University law students, and volunteers from nonprofits. They visited poor neighborhoods, holding free sessions to help residents understand housing rights, contracts, benefits, and complaints. Evelyn sat with exhausted workers after shifts, reading complex clauses, explaining in a gentle yet patient voice. She said, "We don't need to be rich to know our rights," and they believed her. One afternoon, while reviewing papers for a single mother, Evelyn received an envelope with the Moreland University logo. Her heart skipped a beat. Inside was a letter from the dean. The school invited her to return and complete her law program, with a full scholarship for outstanding contributions to community justice. Evelyn sat silently for a long time. The old dream, buried when her mother had a stroke, suddenly returned so vividly, it stung her eyes. But she also had her familiar Maid job, the Riverbend Justice Circle, people relying on her guidance daily. She stood at a crossroads she never thought she'd reach: continue as a maid and community supporter, or return to school to become a full-fledged lawyer and fight even stronger. That evening, she walked through the complex yard where children played. An 8-year-old black girl tugged her shirt, eyes wide with hope. "Ma'am, can someone like me become a lawyer?" Evelyn knelt down, gently placing a hand on the girl's shoulder. Her face bore a smile, warmer and brighter than ever. "You can become anything you want," she said, voice full of belief. "No one gets to decide your worth but you." The girl hugged Evelyn, then ran off as if carrying a whole new sky. Evelyn stood up, taking a deep breath. Morning light shone on the old complex, but today it looked more beautiful than ever. She walked the narrow path through Riverbend homes, the place where her pain began, and her strength too, with lighter steps, a stronger heart. No one knew which path Evelyn would choose: continue supporting the community, or return to law school for her degree. But that no longer mattered, because the surest thing was Evelyn Brooks' journey for justice had only just begun. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, so you don't miss the next inspiring stories. See you again in the next journey, where justice always finds its voice.